We'll do it live!
Recent weeks, trolling Senator Elizabeth Warren as a snake, and in post after post, labeling Mayor Pete Buttigieg a rat.
That's what Americans do now. They're always willing to trade away a little of their freedom in exchange for the feeling, the illusion of security.
But we tortured some folks.
Rudy Giuliani, there's only three things he mentioned in a sentence: a noun and a verb and 9/11. I mean,
my mom is the strongest woman I know.
She should be running.
It's not about.
I moved on her like a bitch. They had and they have a very effective slang machine. And that the way it works is you either report the news the way we want it reported, or we're going to hang a sign around your neck.
We came, we saw, we died.
You know, I know that Russia and other countries would love us to have a debate. This is exactly what they want.
We call it the Putin Protection Act. That's what it is. The Putin Protection Act.
ADL is played out. Nobody knows who the ADL are. Stop giving them attention. Nobody cares about the ADL.
Remember the heat that ended up around the bend the knee and Colin Kaepernick. Many smart people have said it actually was not a thing. The Russian bot started taking out.
Start bringing the ruckus on the Democratic Party.
I found that this was like really nice to just help me doze off.
We'll do it live! Fuck it! Do it live! I'll write it and we'll do it live! And thing sucks!
In 5, 4, 3.
Citizens of the internet, welcome to the nail-biting conclusion of the Polyticks series, episode 46 for you. If you've been paying attention, I've been a little bit absent lately, a little bit AWOL. Life is keeping me busy, but I feel a desire to rant. And so here I am. And if you listen to this, thank you. But I really don't care, because I think right now, everyone's being shadow banned and censored. And, it is one of those times where
well,
people are, I don't know. I just had one of my videos banned from TikTok, and I've been kind of relatively quiet there since. And I feel like there was a recent attack on Rumble. Everything is being locked down or censored or shadow banned, by algorithms, so no one's seeing it. And what are you gonna do? I'm gonna keep screaming into the void like I've always done, and every once in a while the void screams back, and I appreciate that. But I just want to make sure you know that
I've not yet begun to defile myself.
I got some really great new sound bites too. Not a lot, but this one right here is going to be used a lot.
No, I hear you. It's definitely a tiger by the tail.
And then of course, this one has never been more relevant.
No one in high school knew what the word anti-Semitic was until Ye made it popular.
Anyway, I keep seeing these ads for Sandy Hook Promise, which is a cause I identify with to some degree. I identify with the cause of having kids being shot at school less. Let's put it that way. The other side of this, though, and the thing that a lot of the liberal gun control advocates tend to ignore, and I am not on the right or anti-gun control by any measure, but look at our foreign policy. We create chaos and death around the world, and then we wonder why it happens here. Oh no, people are dying in our safe little bubble over here, as we create chaos in literally every other region around the world with our weapons and our military bases and our just penchant for starting wars that we don't really have to fight most of the time, other than with our money. We just fund the wars. We don't actually send our people to go die in them. Look at Ukraine, for example. Look at what's going on in the Middle East right now. None of this blood is directly on our hands. So that's where I'm at today. And if you're listening and you're part of the security state, all I gotta say
Don't
is,
tase me, bro! Don't tase me! I can't do anything! Ow! Ow!
that never gets old. So we got a lot to talk about today, and let's get it started. So this first segment is affectionately titled "The Rich Kids of Beverly Hills," featuring Jack Osbourne. And I want to start by saying, and you'll see, I harbor no resentment or ill will towards Jack Osbourne. And I think that his intentions here are good. I think that the intentions of him, what he did here, and I'm going to show you these clips. He did this podcast with a conservative commentator about the homeless problem in Los Angeles. And it's not that I think Jack Osbourne is a bad person. It's not that I think, he's a total cunt. Maybe that's not the best word to use. Sorry, YouTube. But I think he's not the best person probably to be commenting on this particular issue. And you'll see why. But I think I was also very fair with him in my clip selection here, because I kind of show that, despite some of his more ridiculous points here, he is actually, his heart is in the right place. Let's put it that way. So let's start with this first clip that you're going to love.
I have friends now who have good jobs, they make good money, they have a great apartment, they have everything you could ever want in life. And we're like having open discussions about think about just stealing stuff. Like when they go into a store, they go into a CVS.
Yeah, because they're like, hey, you literally could do it for free because there's no penalty.
That's what we're having serious conversations about morally, where do you stand with it? Because it's not illegal now, or it's not, you can't get in trouble for it.
It's not punishable, yeah.
Not punishable. Normal, rational people now, because it's so okay to commit these crimes, are justifying it to themselves because they're like, well, you can't get in trouble for it, so
Hey guys,
I'd like to challenge Jack Osbourne to follow through with this. Like, you and some of your friends, why don't you do it and see what happens? This is an absolutely ridiculous take, and it's kind of like the right-wing take here right now. And let me explain to you where this take comes from, because as a resident of Los Angeles, I can speak to this. A couple years ago, they passed a ballot initiative called Prop 47. And the idea behind this initiative was this: our jails are full of nonviolent criminals, and we don't have room for rapists and violent criminals who murder people and rape little kids and do all that kind of stuff. So the solution was, let's pass something to make petty theft, like theft of less than $1,000, a misdemeanor, to keep the prison population down for the serious criminals. Now, I'm not saying that this is effectively working the way it was intended. It probably isn't. There's a lot of bureaucracy in California, in the United States in general, but that was the overall goal behind the policy, is like, hey, look, our jails are full of people that frankly have done things that are not really that dangerous, and we need to make room for people who are dangerous. So, Prop 47 basically did that. And now you have all these right-wing commentators going like, crime is totally legal in California now. No, it's more nuanced than that, Jack Osbourne. You and your friends, and I challenge you, go into a store and walk out with a bunch of stuff and see what happens. You will be maybe not arrested, but you also have lawyers, rich. You guys are rich enough to have lawyers and work your way through a case like that. So at the end of the day, you probably won't suffer much from it, unlike a person who, gets caught up in the court system and has to pay a bunch of fines. And yeah, it's not jail sentence to shoplift, but it's also not an unpunishable crime either. And so this like ridiculous take that, oh, I'm thinking about stealing because it's just like not even illegal anymore. It's very reductionist. It's very stupid. Anyway, let's keep moving.
So much in the last 10 years, it is mind-numbing.
And you saw the whole transition of that thing happening, right?
Whole thing, and I can.
So in this clip, he's partially right. And he talks a little bit about how COVID accelerated the homelessness problem in Los Angeles, which I think it did everywhere.
But remember sitting back being like, wow, like what's happening here? And then once COVID hit, it just accelerated it.
Interesting. So COVID kind of amplified everything and just accelerated the whole process, you think?
Absolutely. What it did was, because there used to be certain areas where you weren't allowed to sleep in your vehicle. You couldn't park more than a few hours. They would move you on. During COVID, they stopped doing that. They were just like, no, people have a right to, post up wherever they want. And it just.
So just to kind of break from that for a second, I wanted to show you the statistic I found. And this statistic is basically about the working homeless population in America. So basically what it says is that 40 to 60% of homeless people actually have jobs and are probably sleeping in their cars. And I'm sure COVID accelerated that. The stats on this, I don't know how legit or how recent they are, if I'm being honest. I can say that. So this one says it's from September 22nd of 2022. And I just pulled this, this is literally a screenshot right from Google, but it says the National Coalition for the Homeless estimates as many as 40 to 60% of people experiencing homeless nationwide are employed. And if you know anything about the rent situation here in LA, people sleeping in their cars, it's pretty common. So, it just kind of shows how out of touch with reality this guy is, because he's Ozzy Osbourne's fucking son. This kid has never in his life had to struggle. And we're going to go a little bit deeper into that.
Things where everyone just seemed okay with it because they were more concerned with this, that, and the other. And, everyone's dying from this, this mysterious virus. And we're going to pass a place up here. You'll see a lot of these, as we kind of cruise through. We're going to cruise through the valley, and then we're going to go into Hollywood, and I'll show you guys some things. So
this is another thing I think is funny about this is Jack Osbourne. He doesn't really go to where the homeless problem is a real problem. He's kind of just taking this guy around neighborhoods that he has been to, which are like Hollywood and in the Valley. He goes through Melrose and a bunch of other stuff. But anyway, let's watch this next clip.
For sure.
And I know that I saw the statistics, even though murder is down, crime
is down,
is up. Do you get
other petty crime is up.
Talk to friends of yours who live here.
The thing that blows me away about these guys, and honestly, this guy, Mike something, I forget this guy's actual name, but I want to just stress again that I think that their intention is good. Like they're really, and we'll go deeper into this in this video, but their intention is really good. They're like, hey, this is a problem that needs to be solved. But the way that they approach it, I think, is so one-sided and kind of delusional. They don't ever mention any of the like problems with housing, which we'll get into. They talk about drug addiction, which will anyway, keep watching.
Like, it is without a doubt, everyone would say that. And then you see, our illustrious governor Newsom on TV being like, no, crime is down. What he did, he decriminalized crimes.
See, again, this is what I was talking about with the Prop 47 thing. These people think that it's okay to just steal now because they've got this warped view of that Prop 47 thing by the enemies of that ballot initiative, which I assume are probably private prisons. There was a whole thing with private prisons here in California where we voted to get rid of them. And I believe, and don't quote me on this, I should have gone down this rabbit hole and looked up the research, but I didn't really even think about it till I started ranting. But the federal government actually stepped in on behalf of the private prison lobby, the Biden administration. Now, don't quote me on that. If you have evidence, put them in the comments. But, that is something I remember reading about.
So people are committing more crimes, but now they're not punishable. So
they're not designated crimes.
They're not designated.
Commit a crime, Jack, and see what happens.
He did. Yeah. They let out a bunch of people from prison, and there was a program where they got rid of the drug courts, and they were gonna supposedly they passed this law. I forget what it was, but it was, we're gonna let nonviolent drug offenders out of prison, and we're gonna open up state-run rehabilitation centers.
Now, right here, I want to give Jack credit because here he actually comes with a solution, and it's a good one. And it makes no sense why we haven't invested in something like this.
Everyone was like, okay, that seems like a great idea. They signed off on it, it got voted in, and then they never opened up the rehabilitation centers, but they let everyone out of prison. So you had a bunch of, men and women who are now let out on the streets, who had significant mental health disorders, substance abuse issues, with nowhere to go and no resources that the state had promised them to get well. And like, I've been in recovery 20 years. I firsthand am aware of the trials and tribulations of dealing with substance abuse.
What does that mean?
Now, I just want to pause there for a minute to show you something, because he's like, I've been in recovery for 20 years and I know the trials and tribulations of substance abuse. Look at this. From Us Magazine. In 2003, Jack entered rehab for treatment for an addiction to OxyContin, a rich people's drug addiction. He has since opened up about being child of an addict and how fame contributed to that. I think it was just a matter of time. I think it just sped things up to the inevitable. Whether I'd never touched a drink until the age of 50, I still think the end result would have been the same. I'm one of those people that have an addictive personality, and I like things that change the way I feel, he revealed during a roundtable discussion with Variety in February 2021. Now listen, I'm glad that Jack overcame his addiction, and it's good that he has that perspective, but the difference between Ozzy Osbourne's son and a fentanyl addict is night and day. And I think he really illustrates how out of touch he is by not acknowledging that. It's like, yo, Jack, you had the access to the most expensive rehabs, things that the average person just does not have access to. So, I respect your perspective on this as a former addict, but it's a whole different ball game, my friend, whole different ball game.
So I've been sober nearly 21 years.
So 21 years ago, you went to a facility, you got help.
Yep.
My parents put me in a facility 20 years ago because they could see I was becoming an addict.
And you know, I have countless friends who are living under bridges.
Countless friends from Beverly Hills.
Hope to die junkies,
who've been
shooting up
through
in
the
their
same
neck,
thing.
whatever. They get sober, they get their life together, and
they have rich fucking parents, Jack, who put them through rehabs and get them good jobs at the best companies.
They have a relatively, you know, normal existence. But they were given the resources sometimes by nonprofits and sometimes, you know, from the state at the time, because there used to be drug courts here, to get well. And that...
Now listen, maybe right there he's making an argument that the state should contribute where rich parents aren't available to contribute. And I think that's a good argument to be made, right? But other than that, he lacks perspective on this.
When it comes to the governance of people, politicians have completely played this game of literally charades with human beings.
So he starts by saying, I love California, and I think this is a nationwide problem. But in this clip, they talk about a solution, which I think is good. And like I said, I might disagree with Jack's lack of perspective in some areas, but at the very least, I think that these guys' hearts are in the right place. You know, they're looking at a problem that's fucking terrible and going like, how do we fix this? You know, maybe some of their views on it are misguided, but I respect the fact that they're, you know, listen to this.
And it's sad to see. It's like, I wish people would step up and stand up and actually do something about it.
Yeah.
Is there anything in your opinion, like how do we turn this around? Because I'm most interested in, like, there's a lot of problems obviously to identify, but what's your opinion on turning this thing around?
So I recently was made aware of a program that I think San Antonio did, where they spent a couple $100 million on building a facility that provided housing, mental health resources, rehabilitation, all this stuff in one, you know, under one roof. It was basically a
one-stop shop.
A one-stop shop.
See, a lot of people want to depend on private industry to do this work. And he's making a good point here in the sense that he's saying San Antonio did it, which I looked for some stuff and I could see some programs on how they've improved homelessness. And a lot of it was by providing housing to people. But if we do something like this, it's something that needs to be done by the state, because the people who run it need to be accountable. Because what happens now with these programs is they're all privately funded and they become a business. They become a boon for the people involved instead of an effective means of getting people off the streets and into a life that's productive or at least independent, you know? Anyway, let's keep listening.
And it has had incredibly positive results. We have so much space in this county. There's parts of this place where I could drive you and I'd be like, yeah, technically we're still in LA County. And it's just
he's right,
rolling hills and, you know, up into the mountains. And
it's beautiful.
You could build something like that here so easily. And they just won't. They just won't. And that to me is a great solution. It's like mental health and drug addiction.
Because it doesn't benefit anyone if the state runs it.
Does not get cured by just ignoring it and letting it metastasize.
He's right.
Yeah, you have to have a program, a process.
Yeah.
But it seems
See,
like there's
listen to
no
these guys.
process.
They're right
there's
about
no program. There's no plan.
No plan. And they say that there's a plan. I just don't see it.
So let's keep going. I got a couple more clips from this. It's a good conversation.
COVID, get out of the city because this place went crazy with it.
So he's talking about his friends.
Yeah, I remember when that happened and
leaving LA because of the COVID lockdown restrictions. What happened there? Why my video isn't playing? Huh.
Frustrated. Incredibly frustrated.
Oh, here we go.
that shutdown. If that happened again, I don't know.
All right. I don't know what happened here, but I lost
This
video.
place was known for shutting down small business. Kind of a lot of businesses obviously didn't survive.
Yeah.
And it's because of that shutdown. If that happened again, I don't know if people have it in them to comply.
No.
Maybe there will be some resistance.
Yeah, because everybody could see what a sham it was. A lot of it was.
What are your law enforcement buddies?
People forget the pictures of Gavin Newsom at the French Laundry restaurant during all that, maskless with a bunch of healthcare lobbyists. I mean, that right there to me was the first dead giveaway what was going on. But anyway, these guys, people on the right, were adequately skeptical of that stuff in the beginning. It took a lot of people who, were convinced that the right was the end of America by the constant stream of propaganda a little while to come around, but I think a lot more people are coming around.
Saying about kind of the state of affairs.
They're very frustrated, incredibly frustrated, because they want to be able to do their job, but their hands
Listen to this.
Are so tied in the post George Floyd world of law enforcement. And
I think that's so funny. Cops' hands are so tied in the post George Floyd world of law enforcement. Really? Are they really, Jack? No. The problem in LA is it's such a vast city with so many people and so much going on all the time. We have 5 stadiums now. We have Dodger Stadium, we have Crypto.com Arena, which used to be the Staples Center. We have SoFi Stadium. Right next to it, we have the Forum, and then we have BMO Stadium, and they're building another one for the Clippers. So this is a massive city. People who haven't been here might not understand how spread out it is. It's not like New York where it's densely populated on top of each other. LA is much more spread out. It's someone said this to me the other day. Actually, an Indian immigrant who I was talking to, and he made such a great because we were both talking about how much we love LA, and this is a guy from Bangalore, India, who's been here a large portion of his life and raised his kids here, and he pointed out how there's a different communities within Los Angeles. Like Santa Clarita is way different than Venice Beach, and Silver Lake is way different than Santa Monica, and Santa Monica is way different than Echo Park, and there's all these like little sub communities within Los Angeles. And I think if each one of them took a little bit more pride in their community, that could help alleviate a lot of this problem. But let's keep listening to how law enforcement's hands are tied in the post George Floyd world.
And LAPD pre-COVID wasn't amazing, and
he's right
post-COVID it's even worse. I mean, my kid's school last year had to call LAPD, I think 12 times over an incident.
Wow.
Over
First of all, Jack, I would almost bet whatever school your kid goes to has private security anyway.
Homeless person wandering around, someone trespassing on the property. There was a guy with a knife out front of the school at one point. LAPD didn't show up once.
After those calls were
Can you imagine, like, if you're living in like the hood in Compton and you hear this, you're like, oh, poor Jack. The cops don't show up when you call them. Imagine that. I live in Watts. Fuck you. That's the thing I love about this video too, is they don't go into any part of the town that isn't like a rich, wealthy part of town. Like they spend all their time in Hollywood, the Valley, and like Melrose. It's like, yo, you didn't even, and this guy, to his credit, Mike did another video where he goes to Skid Row, which is where it's like Walking Dead. There's literally like people walking through the streets. And this is a real problem. I'm not in the Valley the other night. I pulled off a freeway ramp at like 3 a.m. and I looked to my left at the light, and there was literally a homeless woman with all her belongings stacked up, sitting on the on-ramp, smoking crack, the off-ramp. Smoking crack, like right there. As I turned my head, she just smoked crack right in front of me, And don't ask me how I know what that looks like, but I do, and I saw it. So it is a problem. And, it was at 3 a.m, granted. So it's not like mom in her minivan pulled up and saw it. And I'm not doubting that happens, but I think the cops are a lot more present for that kind of thing during the day. And I think it happens a lot less during the day. I think that person's probably sleeping during the day. But at the end of the day, all the cops are doing is sweeping the problem under the rug. The idea, and they talk about this a lot in this video as they go through town. We don't see any cops. And it's like, yo, all the cops are going to do is tell them to move. It's not like they're going to fix the problem. They're just going to keep it out of your field of vision. And that's what this whole trip really breaks down to, is like Jack is upset that he can see homeless people now. They've always been there.
One time they showed up, and I think I heard it was like 4 hours later.
What's interesting is,
so at no point do they go, yo, maybe we should sacrifice a little more for the economic betterment of some of these people, or, but like I said, their hearts are in
too much. Like a lot of the footage that you saw of people getting
I
held
wanted
up
to show
at
you this because
cafes
this is
and
some of
robbed
the
outside of
homelessness they
stores was all
actually show.
Melrose.
And
this is Melrose.
It's dirty,
is a
but
road.
it's in-
Melrose Avenue, yeah.
It's on Melrose.
Bunch of restaurants, but this place just got destroyed during COVID.
There you go.
And here's the crazy thing: it was a lot of these businesses that were destroyed were like minority-owned businesses.
Yeah.
It's not like they
So
went
he's heard.
to. I mean, they also went to Rodeo Drive and things like that, and were kind of trying to stick it to the man. But I was like, why are you destroying that sneaker shop that's been here for 25 years and everyone goes to? It's like, well, they went and they broke in, everyone looted the place. And the crazy thing is, I know of shop owners who...
So name a specific shop.
...were robbed during the riots, and they had all their merchandise stolen, and they recognized actual customers that have been coming to their shop for
That
years.
knew who they were.
They knew the people.
That's sad.
Yeah, and they're like, why the fuck would you do that?
Yeah, I think 50% of the businesses in Atlanta are African American owned, and when they had the civil unrest and the riots, they burned down businesses that were black owned businesses.
Yeah. And I get it. People pissed off, angry. They want to feel like they're doing something, but like.
Yeah,
So I think
they'll
that's
destroy people's lives.
Yeah. I'm sure that happened at times, but I think that's another narrative that these people use to defend the crackdown against rioters and looters, when I'm not saying that that's okay either, but again, it's like when you get to a point that you're that desperate, I mean, it's a deeper problem than just bringing more police in to sweep it under the rug, right? So I got one more clip for this segment, and let's just watch that real quick.
Throw her in a bag and,
So, okay,
sell her
let me
on the
set this up
internet.
a little bit. So he tells this story here about, and you should watch this whole video if you're interested in it, but I kind of took some of the key points. But he tells this story about one of his employees someone attempted to sexually traffic her, is what he claims. And what it sounds like to me when I listen to the story is he's like, these two people approached her at Target and were like, you're attractive. Where are you from? If you go to places in LA, there are these scammers. They came up to me and my daughter a few years ago and they're like, oh, you're so cute. Do you want to be on the Disney Channel? And it's a recruitment mechanism for this acting class where they just rip you off. They promise you that if you pay $2,000 to get in this acting class, they're going to get you these gigs in Hollywood. And my daughter, she was like 10 years old when this happened, and she went home and looked up the lady gave us a card, and I was like, we should look them up. She went home and looked them up on Google and was like, oh, these guys are a scam, like read their reviews and stuff about people approaching them at the mall. And Jack tells this story about his friend or his employee being harassed by these people at Target, and it sounds just like something like that. And then he ends it with like, yeah, then 2 cars were following her. Like, yeah, she was paranoid, so she thought 2 cars were following her, and But anyway, they use that to say that that sex trafficking is like a huge problem in America. I'm sure it's not a problem.
Trafficking is a big issue here.
And that's
overall.
I mean, it's like the dirty little secret, I think, of most major cities at this point.
Yeah.
It is just rampant. Like, look at all that.
So that's what it looks like. If you haven't been
I wanna
here,
ask this dude a
you
question,
see
man.
this kind of homeless sprawl everywhere.
Oh, he said, what's that dude recording me for? They look young, too.
Yeah. Those guys did look young. Those were not
Let me
like
take
old.
that back a little bit so you can see
You
it.
know. Right there.
I want to ask this.
All that. Right there.
I want to ask this dude a question, man.
Yeah, that's real common. That's real common.
What's that dude recording me?
I drive around the city all the time.
They look young, too.
Yeah.
For ride share, so I
Those
see
guys
it
did
every
look
day.
young. Those were not like old.
All day.
Old
in every
fucking
neighborhood.
hobos. Got lights and sirens.
Some of them are very sophisticated too.
Where's he gonna come?
Some of the homeless encampments that they built, I'm like, in the industrial part of town, there was a guy that had like multiple rooms in his
And
little
they'll only-
lean-to
I think
tent
it's
with
usually
like
like-
lights and a TV and a,
It only seems like they rush anywhere when there's like weapons involved. And you hear someone.
yeah.
with a
See, here they
gun
are
or
complaining about the
knife or
cops
something,
not
and they
sweeping
kind of
under the
boogie, but-
rug for them.
So it's almost like they've given up on a petty crime.
Yeah,
'Cause
petty
it's
crime
just
is
not.
It's just not worth it because now with all the cashless bail, everyone just gets let out. Hollywood sign.
So anyway, that is the story of rich kids in Beverly Hills commenting on homelessness. And again, I just want to wrap this up with a nice little bow by saying I think Jack's heart is in the right place, but he's just a little bit off base with some of his views of the problem. And like I said, telling people to move in their cars and stuff that are trying to sleep, that are probably working homeless, that live in their cars. He doesn't talk at all about that, but he does talk about a solution. And there is plenty of room in LA, and surrounding areas where we could build something to a mental health facility to, help these people and get them, back to a point where they're actually, able to function in society. And I gotta admit, it breaks my heart being out in the city and seeing people sleeping on the streets, in general. There's just people with a sleeping bag laying on the sidewalk. And if that doesn't fucking bother you, you're not a human being, what the hell? I mean, we live in the richest goddamn country in the world. We should be taking care of each other, at the very least. We obviously have plenty of money to do it. And cheers to Jack for at least thinking in that respect, despite his, out of touchness. So moving on. I don't know if you've noticed lately, but the Republicans have suddenly become AOC. Like they're suddenly, we need to censor views we disagree with, and college campuses need to be silenced, and anyone who says something that I disagree with is anti-Semitic. And, it's it's gotten a little bit funny. And Kanye, what do you have to say about it?
ADL is played out. Nobody knows who the ADL are. Stop giving them attention. Nobody cares about the ADL.
What
no
else?
one in high school knew what the word anti-Semitic was until Ye made it popular.
No, I hear you. It's definitely a tiger by the tail.
So I wanted to start this segment by showing you a clip of the Republicans recently and what they're trying to do to silence protests. And we warned the left about this when the Republicans were crying about censorship the last couple of years. Like, hey, this is going to be weaponized against you eventually. And lo and behold, what do we have going on right now with Palestine and with the skirmish in the Middle East? We have protesters having the same tactics weaponized again. I just had a TikTok video pulled down the other day for being critical of the skirmish in the Middle East. Let's call it that. But watch this.
This is a very important day. On the House Education and Workforce Committee, we're about to have an incredibly important hearing addressing the rise of anti-Semitism on our college campuses and universities. Joining us today to share their personal stories, we have 4 incredibly brave students, Talia, Bella, Eyal, and Jonathan. Jewish students, faculty, and communities at these so-called elite institutions, including my alma mater, Harvard, Jewish students are facing sustained attacks from students and professors who are openly propagandizing terror. And why? Merely because these Jewish students exist.
Okay. Sustained attacks is basically people expressing a viewpoint that they don't want to hear. That's it. That's what the sustained attacks are. No one is hitting anyone. No one is bombing or shooting anyone. Just expressing opinions that are not, you know, what's the best word to use? Not comfortable for these people is an attack against them. That's what they're doing. You know who else did that? AOC. Anyway, keep listening.
In response, campus leadership has cowered to the woke anti-Semitic mob.
Okay, this is the part I love the most, is how they're trying to paint woke as being anti-Semitic. 5 minutes ago, these were the people trying to cancel you for being anti-Semitic or being Nazis or whatever, insurrectionists. And now you're trying to cancel them for being anti-Semites. You're literally the same people that you made fun of and warned us about a couple of weeks ago.
This fanaticism against Israel is rooted in ignorance and hatred. Our institutions of higher education are failing our next generation. They are failing Talia, Bella, Eyal, Jonathan, and countless other students. The attacks.
Poor Jonathan had to hear that Palestine was and Israel was an apartheid state. Someone said that to him. Do you know how painful it is to hear that for Jonathan? He's lived his entire life in a bubble.
On October 7th, shocked the conscience of the world, marking the deadliest day for the Jewish people since the Holocaust. However, these atrocities were met with callous cruelty at universities across America.
No, they were not met with callous cruelty. Everyone agrees that October 7th was horrible and a tragedy and an act of terrorism. Innocent civilians were targeted. Now, the details of how they were killed are a little dicey at the moment. And the fog of war sometimes obscures what happened. And I'm not going to go much deeper than that because I don't want to have my shit shut off. But this idea that this is, oh my, anyway, let's just keep listening. I'll shut up.
America. At Harvard, 30 radical student organizations disgustingly blamed Israel for the barbaric attacks against innocent Israelis, only for the group's actions to be brazenly defended by Harvard President Claudine Gay as, quote, free expression.
Do these people have any, like, you know that these people aren't this stupid? That's what's so revealing about this is these people have like law degrees and shit. They know what they're doing. They're playing dumb. They know they're being inconsistent. They know that 5 minutes ago they were on the other side of this fence, and now they just want to comfortably jump the fence and start pointing fingers and act like they weren't just on the other side of it. And it's we can see through this, lady. Like, I know you're smarter than this. And I know that there's a money hand up your ass and you're a puppet. And
following our remarks today, the students will join my colleagues at the Education and Workforce Committee hearing, where Harvard, MIT, and Penn's leadership will likely defend desperately their indefensible recent actions and the campus culture that has enabled anti-Semitism on their campuses. Any voice who openly defends the massacre of innocents has chosen the side of terrorism. I continue to demand.
So find me a person that's openly defending the massacre of innocents. No one is openly defending that. And this is like when Ron Paul said that 9/11 was blowback. People lost their minds, but he was right. No one wants to go, okay, why did this happen? That's the problem, right? Why? Yes, what Hamas did was absolutely horrible, and they killed civilians, and it's terrorism. But why did they do it? They didn't just wake up one day and go like, hey, we hate Jewish people, let's do this. Like, it's not that simple. And this lady knows that it's not that simple.
Demand that Harvard President Claudine Gay resign and that Harvard and schools
disingenuous.
like it are prohibited from collecting taxpayer dollars.
See, and
Here
this is the
today.
thing that we warned y'all about, where they're literally defunding the people whose opinions they disagree with. They're making sure that this is a crackdown to keep college students from being able to say things that they don't want to hear. And it's fucking insane that people didn't see this before. Now, the plus side of all this, of course, is that the people who 5 minutes ago were, defending censorship on behalf of the state are now like going, oh shit, now they're using it against us. And hopefully a lot of the people who are, protesting an end to what a lot of people are referring to now as a genocide, hopefully people that are doing that are waking up to the fact that, hey, this principle doesn't just apply to you. Remember COVID, when you said anyone that, had some skepticism was a quote unquote anti-vaxxer? Now do you get it? Now do you get it? I hope so. The smarter ones will. But, the tribal nature of these debates has just made it ridiculous. So let's watch this other clip of one of your favorite people.
With Representative Roger
same
Williams.
Tactic.
And that's when we start to see that this issue is not about one incident. It is cultural. It is a culture of lack of impunity, of accepting of violence and violent language against women, and an entire structure of power that supports that. Because not only have I been spoken to disrespectfully, particularly by members of the Republican Party and elected officials in the Republican Party, not just here, but the President of the United States last year told me to go home to another country, with the implication that I don't even belong in America. The governor of Florida, Governor DeSantis, before I even was sworn in, called me a whatever that is.
Oh my God. That's almost as terrible as poor Jonathan, who had to hear that someone say that Israel might be an apartheid state. It's so terrible, AOC. See how these people sound exactly the same?
Dehumanizing language.
Weaponizing the HR department to protect them from views they don't want to hear. I mean, AOC could literally, these misogynist dudes that are saying, anti whatever shit to them, she could just go on the floor and say, like, look at how caveman and backwards these people are. They sound like they're from the 1950s or something. Like their brains are still stuck in that era. But she'll go and cheer for the deplatforming of the president because he said something mean to her.
Is not new. And what we are seeing is that incidents like these are happening in a pattern. This is a pattern of an attitude towards women and dehumanization of others. So while I was not deeply hurt or offended by little comments that are made, when I was reflecting on this, I honestly thought that I was just going to pack it up and go home. It's just another day, right? But then yesterday, Representative Yoho decided to come to the floor of the House of Representatives and make excuses for his behavior. And that I could not let go. I could not allow my nieces, I could not allow the little girls that I go home to. I could not allow victims of verbal abuse and worse to see that.
We must
to see that excuse
from speech they find
and to see our Congress accept it as legitimate.
So it's interesting to me that these conservatives who 5 minutes ago were making fun of AOC for this and rightfully calling her out for cheering for the deplatforming of Tucker Carlson as if that was some great thing. Now they are those people. They sound just like AOC.
A letter she sent out to her followers like in 2021.
right-wing operatives with millions of followers on social media are spreading flat-out lies and misleading information about Alexandria. But with your help, we can force Twitter and Facebook to take action and enforce their own rules. And so
Max and Aaron here are breaking down how AOC sent out notes to her followers to support censorship on social platforms. And the next clip, I'll explain why I'm showing you this, but listen.
Asks her followers to report anyone who is spreading quote unquote disinformation about Alexandria to the censors. So what were they doing and saying? Well, a lot of this had to do with Michael Tracy, who questioned her phony, tearful performance about January 6th. And they were questioning what she actually was doing on January 6th and whether her life was actually in danger. In fact, she had already been evacuated through the tunnels out of the Capitol and was in a secure location when she did this performance about how she heard a voice at her door and someone said, "Is she in there? Is she in there?" But it wasn't even a right-wing rioter. It was a Capitol police officer there to protect her. So people started questioning her. And then she asks her followers to report them all to the censors, to the principal. And what Taibbi's doing, he's taking the principal away. He's exposing the principal as a dishonest broker. So she can't have that. She's a little snitch who appeals to authority to advance her goals and protect herself from legitimate criticism over the deceptions that she deploys. Yeah. So, this is a war on journalism. It's a war on real journalism by phony opportunists like Mehdi Hasan and snitches, little teachers' pets like AOC. And so we need to stand with the real journalists here who are exposing abusive state power as journalists should do. That's just classic journalism.
Yeah. So AOC is advocating in that clip from a year or two ago for censorship. And look at her now. Now the same censorship that she was advocating for is being used against her. Watch this.
Without making someone extremely angry. And angering people in power, angering people in general, angering people on the internet. And that's, I'm just gonna say that up front. And frankly, that's a big reason why I think so many people have been silent around the human rights crisis that Palestinians face.
No, people have been silent because of the censorship regime that you were fucking standing for 5 minutes ago when it benefited you. And now you're on the other side of it. People are silent because that's why people are silent, AOC, because of you.
And the subjugation of what we're seeing. But I think that moment is changing. Oh, I think someone said audio gone.
What's the weather like on your planet?
And so that's what you have right now. You have the woke GOP, the people who 5 minutes ago were arguing on a matter of principle that censorship was of the security state was uncalled for, and now they're fully behind it because they can use it to their liking on an issue that they support. And that, my friends, is American politics on the whole. That's what we're dealing with.
Yo, we here now. Stupid.
All right, let's move on to the next segment here. I'm done with the woke GOP. So I want to start this by talking about so this is basically a doctor that I watch a lot, and I probably talked about him before on my live stream, but he's amazing, Dr. Berg. And he's really changed my life. I learned a lot about keto diet and just he's one of those guys. It's not political, it has nothing to do with politics. he is a guy who just gives health advice. And I'll tell you this, I had this epiphany the other day, because a lot of my friends right now that are my age are bedridden or like completely dependent on pharmaceutical pills to be healthy or live comfortably. And I'm not. And I think a lot of that is because I couldn't afford healthcare for a long, long time. I'm still right on the edge, so don't get me wrong, but I didn't have a membership to the club where they prescribe you drugs and get you strung out into this like perpetual hamster wheel of drugs and side effects and prescriptions and all that shit. So I've always had to kind of find the root of the problems I was having on my own through research and figure out a solution on my own. And in the long run, I think it's probably been the best for me, because the American healthcare system as a whole is a complete joke. It's a complete corporatocracy, money grab, for-profit pyramid scheme. You go to a hospital and a thing that you would buy anywhere else, like a cup of soda, is like $700 because they know that they can build the insurance for that and make a profit. And it's just the whole thing is just a house of cards. And luckily, I haven't had to participate in that. And that, a lot of that is thanks to Dr. Berg. So anyway, I wanted to kind of highlight this because Dr. Berg got political recently because he's being censored now. And it ties to what we've been talking about. So I want to show you just a couple of these clips here where he's talking about, basically what happened is he puts out videos advising people on different health issues and whatnot. And this guy randomly put out a response to one of his videos. And it's very telling that they did this. So I want you to watch kind of how he breaks it down, because it's evidence that he's over the target on some level. And he explains why right here. So watch this.
Gil Carvalho, who did a fact-checking video on me. So today we're going to do a fact-checking video on the fact checker.
So we got a ton of requests from a lot of you guys to comment on this video.
Okay, so the first thing he says is there's a ton of you that requested to do a video on one of my videos. What does my channel have to do with your channel? I'm just curious. Like, Gil, can you just maybe show us how many people actually requested this video?
We're going to focus only on the substance. No ad hominems. I didn't Google him. I don't know anything about him. I didn't go watch a bunch of his other videos for context. Nothing. Because it doesn't matter. The only thing that matters is whether the claims match the evidence.
So don't you hate that when you know that there's some bad news coming or some negative things about you coming, but they kind of prep it with, oh, we won't look at it as a character. We'll be really nice to him, as someone maybe pushes you underneath the bus. Okay, let's continue.
Let's go.
This was in 2018, the new guidelines by the American Heart Association, okay? This is brand new. They said total cholesterol is not significantly associated with heart disease. Okay? That's the new finding. They just found out. Looking at your total cholesterol doesn't really give you a lot of information in relationship to predicting heart disease.
So, as we know with science, it's not religion, it's constantly evolving. And in this case, the science has evolved. And that is inconvenient to people who sell cholesterol drugs. And my first kind of thought about who this guy was that's fact-checking my favorite doctor, who has greatly improved my life through YouTube videos, is, oh, this guy's a stooge for, one of those industries. But I was wrong. I was almost right, just wrong industry. So listen to this.
One little thing that Dr. Gill kept bringing up was this word "we." He keeps saying, "Well, we did this," or "We're doing that." My first thought was, I thought you were an independent guy who just basically is putting out the message and doing videos on various topics. It's not on his YouTube channel. I had to do a little searching, and I suspect it's a group that he's a member of. And of course, I'm just guessing, but that's the only group that I could find. So Dr. Gill is a member or council member of an organization called True Health Initiative. So let's take a look at what this organization is. Plant-based diet.
It's an NGO, probably funded secretly by one of the industries I just referred to.
It's for reversing disease and saving the planet. Okay, so this is a plant-based organization. All right, let's go down to the bottom and take a look at the purpose of this organization and what they do. Okay, changing policy, changing minds, improving lives. We are a global coalition of world-renowned experts fighting fake facts and combating false doubts about creating a world free of preventable diseases using the time-honored evidence-based fundamentals of lifestyle as medicine. Okay, so the whole mission is to fight fake facts and combat false doubts. Okay, all right. So that must be the organization that he's talking about when we're talking about we. If we scroll down, we see No Beef Week Challenge. Okay, so this is definitely a vegan or vegetarian type group supporting the benefits of plant-based. Let's take a look at their partners, the True Health Initiative partners. Okay, we have no beef. So I can see very clearly they're against beef. Now, if you look at how many videos that I have on meat and beef, there's a lot. I actually am pro-beef, right? I tell people to consume beef. Now I see why this fact-checking video was created. Dr.
Now, I just want to say, too, that I'm pro-beef as long as it's humanely farmed, because that's one of the things that gets lost on people. And he covers that. He's pro-grass-fed beef because grass-fed beef has nutrients that farm-raised beef does not. And anyway, keep listening.
Gill also did one on Dr. Berg, who also has the same philosophy, because we're into a healthy version of the ketogenic diet. Okay, so now it's all...
And a ketogenic diet, as I mentioned at the beginning of this, will prevent you from being strung out on pharmaceutical drugs with a bunch of different side effects for things like high blood pressure or diabetes.
Making a lot more sense. So, Dr. Gill, if you're watching... I just want to let you know I did participate in a study involving grass-fed beef and from farmers all over the United States, and they submitted their beef into this study. And it was a metabolomic study looking at all these metabolites and comparing grass-fed to grain-fed beef, okay? And about 6 months after the study, the researcher called me up and said, "What are you doing?" I said, "What do you mean?" He says, "Take a look at this report. Look at this first graph, total phytochemicals. Phyto stands for plants. Interesting. So you can clearly see the difference between the beef that I submitted for this research project as far as the amount of phytochemicals, plant-based chemicals in the beef. And this was compared to other farmers who had grass-fed and compared to grain-fed. So this was the total phytochemicals. Okay, if we scroll down.
So the point he's making here is a good one, because right now, the majority of the beef we eat is fed with grain that is sprayed with all kinds of chemicals and raised in, it's GMO grain. And so cows that graze naturally and eat natural, grass with mineral content in it produce better meat. I mean, that's a no-brainer. And so he's being fought by these industries who are trying to get everyone to believe that eating meat is the devil and the enemy. And it's funny because if you see like the guy on Good Morning America or whatever, like, "Oh, Jimmy's 105. How do you do it, Jimmy?" He's always like, "Well, I just eat fat back and smoke cigars every day," or whatever. So health, I think, it's not a one size fits all type thing. And, you have symptoms and you have certain things. For me, I'll be a little transparent here. I was pre-diabetic. I worked out, but I was eating food. My diet was terrible. And I was having all these problems. I was being affected by it, you know, like my gallbladder, my liver, and all these other internal processes were being affected by how terrible my diet was. And I always thought, oh, well, I exercise so I can eat what I want. But no, there turns out there's a lot of poison in our food supply. And as soon as I started listening to Dr. Berg and correcting my diet and exercising more and stuff, my health improved in a lot of ways that I never thought it would. So, you know, he's over the target now. And this is one of those areas I thought I would share that is collateral damage by the censorship regime, where now everything is disinformation that's not corporate sanctioned, whether it's news, whether it's health information, even historical quotes now are starting to be censored, as I'd like to get into in another episode, but we won't go down that rabbit hole today. So Dr. Berg being censored. Next up on the docket, I don't know if you read this. This is actually pretty recent news, but Google recently lost an antitrust lawsuit to the creator of the game Fortnite. And this is really interesting stuff. Glenn Greenwald actually had Matt Stoller on his show talking about it. And so I will let them clue you in. But I got the meat of the argument right here.
What it is that we should know about this case where Google just lost in front of a jury on 11 counts of antitrust violations.
Yeah, I mean, this is a huge deal, right? This is a multi-trillion-dollar corporation, almost like a private government, private almost kind of central.
You mean Google?
Organ for Google, yeah, sorry, in global, which multi-trillion-dollar big tech corporation are we talking about, right? It like controls whenever we have a question, like Google controls the answers that we get. You know, you can call it global censor, whatever. It's very, very powerful. It's also one of several really powerful big tech firms. None of them have ever lost a major antitrust case. And now, for the first time, a jury in San Francisco, the heart of big tech country, said Google has violated Android phone.
The case that the Justice Department has brought against Google that is now into this trial stage.
That are saying Google's too powerful in these different ways. There's also cases against Amazon. There's some against Facebook. There will probably be some against Apple and maybe Microsoft. And like, so this is, I think, hopefully the beginning of a wave of allegations that these companies have been violating the law, and then kind of a restructuring of these companies so that we can actually have some control over our society again. Does that make sense?
Yeah, absolutely. So let's talk about this case, so just to understand specifically what was alleged here and what the jury found. The case that the Justice Department has brought against Google that is now into this trial stage that you and I have talked about before on this show is one that really goes to the heart of Google's business, to its search engines, the way it disadvantages its competitors, with its search engine dominance. This case wasn't about its search engines, but instead was about the dominance Google exercises through its Google Play Store on Android phones and its ability to charge fees.
So listen to this. This is where he kind of describes the details of the case and why they won.
And to use its ad business in conjunction with this Play Store. What specifically was the kind of antitrust violation the jury found Google had to have engaged in?
Yeah, so like we either have in our phones an Apple phone or an Android Google phone, right? And these are supercomputers that are in all of our pockets, and they are basically digital leashes that track us. And we do a lot of commerce through them. And Google and Apple not only surveil us, they also they take a VIG, they take a piece of every time we transact and buy an app, right? So this claim was from Epic Games, which is they make video games. They make a number of software that goes into other video games. And they said, you know what? We are tired of having to go through the Google Play Store to get an app onto an Android phone. Because what Google does is they say, look, if you want to get an app onto an Android phone, you have to sell it through our app store. There's no technical reason for this. They just you have to sell through our app store, and you have to
Apple does this too, by the way.
Use our payment system, basically their credit card process.
I don't know if they're as crazy as Google with the payment processing, but
unlike a normal payment credit card processor, which charges like 2% or 1% or 3%, Google charges 30%. And so they're like, you have to go through the Google Play Store. So that's the only store for apps, and we're going to charge 30%. And Epic, a number of other companies sued, but Epic, the CEO was really mad, and he said, I'm not going to settle. and it went to a jury, and the jury said, yup, Google is monopolizing. They are forcing companies to use their, it's called a tying claim, but they are forcing companies that want to sell through their app store to use their payment system, and they're taking that 30%. And now it's going to go to a remedy phase where a judge is going to say, all right, you're breaking the law. You have to either maybe allow other companies to have app stores on the Android phone, or you can't force companies to use your payment system, or you have to spin off Android, like whatever it is. Like the judge could actually break them up if he wanted. It'll also likely be appealed, but it's a huge deal.
So what he's talking about here is a huge deal because it kind of sets a legal precedent that now judges have to look at when they rule on these cases. And what's interesting with this is there's a very analogous situation to Elon Musk buying Twitter, where this guy who runs the company that makes Fortnite, a very, very popular game. If you don't know, I'm sure most of you do, but this guy has a lot of money. So the point that Matt makes in this next clip is we may have people with some power, through money that they've accumulated, actually going after real power here, which is kind of what happened with Twitter. You can say whatever you want about Elon Musk. I don't think that he's the champion of free speech that he put himself forward as by any stretch. He's like anyone. He censors on what he thinks what offends him. So, but by the same token, there's a lot of stuff being posted on Twitter that you're not seeing on other platforms. And I'm one of those people who will never call it X. I mean, that's ridiculous, but watch this. This is where Matt kind of talks about what I just alluded to.
Just bury anybody they want that's a competitor to their other businesses like YouTube. It's impossible. And people in the audience should try and go do it. Think of a show that you remember we did and try and go to Google and find it by entering the title or the general topic with my name in Rumble and see if you can find this video. I have a hard time finding my own videos if I don't know the exact name as they appear on Rumble. And even then, the search engine will usually point me to the clip of it we post on YouTube, even though the viewership is like 1/20th of what it gets on Rumble. And you can really see how Google, with this dominance that it has in the search engine, can just bury other companies, especially ones that compete with them in other areas. And so it makes this idea of competition a joke because of just how monopolistic they are.
Remember when Google's slogan was "Don't be evil"? That was before they literally controlled almost all of the information flow in the world.
Is this a sign that these other companies that have also been labeled monopolies by the relevant committee of the U.S. Congress, Facebook, Amazon, and Apple, also are in trouble in similar ways to the way Google is, in your view?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the reasons is because this was not a government suit. One of the key distinctions between the way that the U.S. works and the way Europe works is in Europe, they have these big government agencies that do stuff for the public. Whereas in the U.S., you bring cases yourself, right? Like Rumble's bringing a case. Or class action lawyers can do it, right? And you don't have to rely on the government or bureaucrats or politicians. You can bring a case yourself. And that's what's so exciting about this is Epic Games brought the case. These are very hard to win, or traditionally very hard to win. And they won. And now what I'm seeing is all of these like fancy law firms are actually, who always defended these big companies, they're starting to realize, oh, wait a second, maybe we can build a bigness going after these companies. And you're starting to see, you just saw today, a private company filed a suit against Amazon for targeting them in their retail store. And so like, I think you're going to see
Amazon is notorious for that, by the way. You put a product up on their store that starts selling, they copy it and like basically cut their price, and put you out of business. I've seen it happen several times with people.
A ton of you're going to see a ton of companies starting to file suits against big tech. And I mean, how like, you talk a lot about it's like Bill Ackman, and like one of the things that's going on in these is that like rich, powerful dudes, like they like to fight over annoying things in universities because it like gives them a thrill. And it's like, here you have the guy behind Epic is a guy named Tim Sweeney. And like What he did is the right thing that you should do if you're an angry billionaire that wants some sort of justice, is he took on Google, right? And that's the kind of thing that you hopefully will see. We'll see like people who really, who have some power in our society are actually going to start targeting the real oppressors that we're facing, which are like these big tech firms and other dominant firms, not just big tech, but across the economy.
So there you have it. That's an interesting development, and we'll see what happens. But it's a step in the right direction, because while I think Google and Amazon and all these tech advancements are great, the things are spiraling out of control. And I've always said I'm a supporter of capitalism. Don't throw tomatoes at me, but it needs some guardrails, to put it lightly. And when you maintain this level of power over perception, and I mean, you see it bleeding into everything, the censorship thing, like I showed you with Dr. Berg, like we talked about earlier in the stream with AOC and the woke GOP now. These platforms should be agnostic to politics and, not in a position where they control the entire dialogue, regardless of what side you come down on the dialogue, whatever the issue of the day is. It's just it's not the American way. Open debate is why we thrived and got to where we are as a country. I mean, and obviously my first segment on homelessness kind of highlights how where we are could be a lot better, but you can't look at history and not argue that it's not a good time to be alive. So I'm somewhat optimistic that this kind of stuff is happening, and we're seeing some real change. Hopefully we'll see how this plays out, but it's a step in the right direction. All right. We already had someone in the comments, because they saw my headline about how Tucker Carlson is a demon, and boy, are they going to be disappointed. Because I think Tucker Carlson might be the most morally honest person in journalism today, in mainstream journalism anyway. And obviously he's not in mainstream journalism anymore, but I think I'm going to show you some clips from this interview he did with Dave Smith. And I definitely want you to go watch the whole thing, because it blew me away. But a lot of people don't realize that Tucker Carlson was a deadhead. Tucker Carlson was literally a deadhead. So he's taken acid before. He's taken psychedelics. So he has that perspective that a lot of people don't. And I think it was Russell on talking about this the other day, and it might have been on Jimmy Dore or their stream, but he was talking about how a lot of people, to get into these 3-letter agencies, you can't have ever smoked a joint or taken psychedelic drugs or anything like that. So you don't have that perspective. And that's why a lot of the people in these worlds are such automatons who just like, yes, whatever, I will do whatever power tells me to do. And, people who ingest mind-altering drugs don't usually end up that way. So anyway, I want to show you this clip from this interview that Tucker did with Dave Smith. And this is such a great clip, because they document the trajectory of anti-war conservatives. Now, I want to start by saying Dave Smith here is a big Ron Paul fan, which I was a big Ron Paul fan. And if you're a Bernie person, you remember that Ron Paul's campaign was almost kind of like the foundation for Bernie's success later on, because what they did with Ron Paul is they would do these money bombs right before the filing deadlines, and Ron Paul would come out on top because he would raise all these small donations through the internet, through his rabid followers on the internet. And he would, like, the news would have to go like, oh my God, Ron Paul was like the #1 fundraiser this quarter, and that was when I think the political realm realized their strength in numbers. And as that progressed and eventually Trump was elected president, that's why social media and that kind of organizing is being, censored at every opportunity. First over, misinformation, from COVID, then over misinformation from Russia, now over, misinformation from what's going on in the Middle East, and you name it. But watch this clip of Tucker and Dave basically documenting the trajectory of the anti-war conservative.
Very interesting to me, and is the role you've kind of played in this. I mean, the role you, obviously it's a feedback loop too. So it's like there's this big realignment. There's been a big kind of transformation in our country over the last few years. Obviously, the most stark example of it is, say, looking at, say, 2004, the Republican presidential, ticket versus Donald Trump in 2016, standing up there and telling Jeb Bush, your brother lied us into war in South Carolina at the Republican primary, and then winning, dominating the next day at the poll, at the voting. And, you've been a big part of this, where it was kind of shocking for a while that the 8 p.m. hour at Fox News, and the top rated show in all of cable news, was the most anti-war voice in the corporate media. And this was, for someone like me, like I'm 40, and so I was like a young adult during and I lived in New York City during 9/11 and the war on terror years. I think for sometimes like younger guys, they don't kind of appreciate how crazy of a transformation that was. And so it's kind of interesting that I think Donald Trump and you, I would say, are probably the two biggest figures that kind of gave the right half of America permission to re-examine some of this stuff. Like it's not making you Michael Moore anymore to do it. You could just be kind of like Tucker Carlson or Donald Trump,
Well, I think the slur was, and it was rooted in truth probably, is if you were against American military, the projection of American military force, you were against America. You didn't have self-confidence. You were personally probably a pussy, but you.
It's so true. It's so true. They made you feel like you were a wimpy bitch if you were against the Iraq war.
You also didn't believe in your country or its ideals or its foreign projects. And I mean, I certainly trust me, I employed that slur on TV. I mean, I was in TV since I was in my, mid 20s. So I had a lot of years of repeating these slogans, which were completely false. And I just wasn't self-aware enough to know what I was doing. But the point is, 20 years ago this week, weirdly, I went to Iraq in the winter of 2003, and I won't be boring, but I'll just say in one sentence, that completely changed my view of everything, because it turned out what I had been claiming, espousing, hoping for was all totally false. And so that set off a chain reaction in my head. And by the time I got back to Washington, where I lived, my views had completely changed. I mean, it was inchoate at that point. I wasn't exactly sure what I believed, but I know what I didn't believe, which was everything I had been saying. And I said this out loud and immediately lost, an awful lot of friends who took it much.
That's the point when Tucker Carlson became a demon, when he became the devil that he's known as today in the media, in the mainstream media.
More seriously than I thought they would, and who were not interested in intellectual inquiry or thinking really at all. They were very lockstep Stalinists, and I didn't know that. I don't know how I'd been living among these people. Some of them were very bright.
I would use Stalinists, but okay.
But I just didn't get it. And some of them truly hated me, and to this day hate me, just because I reassessed on the basis of evidence. Now, maybe I'm wrong. I always leave open that possibility, but I mean, why would you be anyway? Whatever. So that.
You got to respect that too, saying maybe I'm wrong. It takes a lot of, there aren't many people in the political world today that would ever say that, ever.
For me, for like 20 years, I didn't feel like anyone agreed with me. But Trump made it possible to make the case, hey, this isn't good for us. I'm against foreign adventurism. I'm against the neocon program because I love America. I live here. My kids live here. I don't want to wreck it. He made that case. No one had ever done that before. And I mean, that was the moment. You're right. It was that South Carolina debate, and all the dumb people on TV, political reporters, the dumbest of all reporters, because it's the easiest reporting. You just recite poll numbers and cliches. They were all in. I was on the set when that happened. They're like, oh, well, he just lost South Carolina. And the checks notes, South Carolina is the highest percentage of military veterans of any state, and they're going to hate this. And it turns out to be, of course, the mirror image. Military veterans who'd had their lives destroyed or at least put on hold by these totally pointless wars were the most on Trump's side.
And so I never thought about that, but that was the point. he won South Carolina after he shot down Jeb Bush over the 9/11 stuff. That was like the Ron Paul moment. You know, Ron Paul did something similar in the 2012 debate. He was booed for basically saying that 9/11 was blowback. But watch this other clip of Tucker, because this is one of my favorites. I mean, he sums it up right here.
American culture and Western culture. Like, we haven't produced meaningful art at scale since 1945. Like, everything we produced in architecture, visual arts, music is a little different. I think we have created innovative music in that time, but certainly in the visual arts and architecture, it's just been pure shit since 1945. Really, 1945. Like, something changed at a very basic level in Western culture. And like, what is that? I thought.
And it's funny how every time we have a war effort in the United States, it's framed through those glasses, through the World War II glasses. We're the good Allied forces and everyone else is a Nazi.
But we won. Like, why would it destroy our creative impulse? But it did. And why is there not a serious inquiry into that? I don't understand. I mean, I don't understand.
Right
here. There's this old Adams quote, and man, I'm going to butcher it, but he said it's something like, if we go around the world searching for wars, we'll become the dictatoress of the world, but we will lose our own soul.
That's right.
And there's something about that, right? Like, happening right away. Like, okay, here's the trade. It's like this. Here's the trade.
If you don't think we've lost our soul, look at what's going on in the Middle East right now.
You know, empire for your soul. And that's kind of the deal. And then, of course, that's after World War II springs up the whole, what we know as the national security apparatus today, the creation of the CIA and kind of this whole.
But it's also, it does affect us on the level of our souls. I mean, you should not commit violence except in extraordinary circumstances related to your self-defense. And that's true in your own home. Your wife pisses you off, you shouldn't punch her in the face. That's grotesque. It's a crime. And
listen to that. What an evil man he is.
The idea that you sort of wave away civilian casualties or even military casualties as no big deal, or the cost of doing business or something we should celebrate, is disgusting. And I don't care. Look, I hated Osama bin Laden. He killed 3,000 of my countrymen, including someone I know. But when he was killed, it's like, I'm glad the threat is gone, but I'm not going to celebrate the shooting of another person. And I don't care not because he didn't.
I'm not going to celebrate the shooting of another person. That's the point I tried to make when Ashley Babbitt was shot during the January 6th thing. And so many liberals who were against police brutality and police violence against Black people and cops being a judge, jury, and executioner cheered that shooting because they were so propagandized that was, some crazy attempt to overthrow. Anyway, January 6th was safe and effective.
Deserve to die. He did deserve to die, but because celebrating people getting shot is bad for me. And if you have an entire country that's like, oh yeah, we, burn down this city and that's great. No. You should never celebrate violence or you will become a monster. It's super simple. And that's all through the Old Testament, by the way. Everyone's like, oh, the Old Testment's so violent. Really? David, who committed a lot of violence, spends all of his time talking about, oh man, violence is bad. People who commit violence know how bad it is. Talk to someone who shot someone else in war. They're very against violence for a reason. And when we're celebrating it nationally as a culture, I think we've really lost something important.
100%.
There you have it. The most evil man in cable news, Tucker Carlson, just laying it out for you. Why he's such an evil person. It's evidence, this comment I got earlier about Tucker Carlson is just evidence of how well the propaganda of the last, 5 to 10 years has worked to completely zombify a large portion of the population. You don't even have to listen to anything Tucker Carlson ever says. John Oliver, I don't know if you remember this. I remember this very clearly. It was when I lost a lot of respect for John Oliver. He did an entire piece about how Tucker is a white supremacist racist. And, I like some of John Oliver's work too. I think the stuff he does on his show is great. A lot of it. He does a lot of great exposés that people, exposes a lot of problems that I don't think people outside of his audience would ever see. And I think he does a good job. But, that's someone who I trusted acting like Tucker Carlson is some demon. And when you listen to the guy talk and he says things like that, you realize, wow, I was completely lied to about this person. And it's messed up, So I want to move on to another segment, which I thought was so good. And it sucks because my PowerPoint special effects don't work in these slides when I show them on when I upload them. So this slide was a lot cooler looking when I created it, but it's a shot of the American Revolution. And you're going to find out why this screenshot is part of this bit. But what I'm going to do here to start is play a clip of your boy, America's sweetheart, Andrew Tate, basically intellectually destroying Piers Morgan. And the clip is from Rising. So
let me ask you a question, because I want to understand your point of view.
It's actually my interview with you.
Yeah, but you tried to understand mine. I just want to understand your point of view. If I believed, or if Israel believed, that one of the people in your house was a terrorist and decided to destroy your entire house and kill your entire family, would you sit and say, well, maybe there was a terrorist inside, I accept that? Or would you be enraged? Genuine question.
I don't think you can take an individual person's response.
Well, it's a bunch of individual people in Gaza.
Yeah,
They're people, individuals with thoughts and dreams and aspirations which are being annihilated. 15-year-old girls without legs because of cruise missiles.
Let's come to
they
that.
are individual people. They're not cattle, Piers.
Let's come to
They're
that.
people.
Right.
You know we're in a wild place when Andrew Tate is the voice of reason, right? Wow. But the reason I have this picture of the American Revolution here is Bree and Robbie get into it here. And Robbie, being the conservative guy, of course, he's very pro a certain state that we all know and love. So I want you to hear this. I don't know if he did this on purpose or not, but just watch this.
Being here is disproportionate and wildly out of sync with what the norm is.
Well, I mean, it seems like it's outside the norm because, frankly, we don't see a lot of conventional war anymore. But I mean, we reduced entire cities in Germany and Japan to rubble. We killed thousands and thousands of people, women and children, non-combatants, in the course of our campaign to eliminate or force the surrender of a hostile regime.
So the thing he leaves out of that, of course, is that those regimes had standing armies and weapons and planes and tanks and stuff like that. Interesting that he glosses over that.
I mean, that is what they're doing. Hamas is a hostile regime. It is a siege of...
Hamas is not a regime. It's a terrorist group, by your own definition. A disparate group that does not have a state or an army behind it like Germany and the Axis forces did.
Gaza, but it's also a war between two organizations, Hamas and the State of Israel. That's what's happening, and
it's like that would be like Russia versus the YMCA.
Pursuing the aim of the surrender or elimination of the other organization.
Is Palestine a state? Does Palestine get to have statehood? Does Palestine get to have an army? Is it allowed to have an army?
I mean, they got to vote for the people in charge of them.
Is Palestine allowed to have a standing army?
They have combatants who attacked Israel.
Does Palestine have a standing army?
No.
It doesn't, and it is not allowed to because it's not allowed statehood or any of the self-determination that a state would have.
Good on Bree for calling him out on that.
That's what Palestinians are fighting for. They're fighting for the same
But
privilege.
they are fighting. You concede that.
Of course. Why shouldn't they?
Right. So it's a military conflict between.
No. Civil rights movement fought for their freedom. The South African apartheid fought for our freedom.
They're fighting with violence.
I hate to break it to you, but the Revolutionary War, South African apartheid, the end of slavery, all of that happened with violence.
And the Revolutionary War, the response in the Revolutionary War was that the country we were revolting against sent ships full of people to kill us, to kill the people leading the revolution.
Does he realize what he's saying here? He's comparing Palestine to the American Revolution, which there are a lot of analogous, factors there. An empire force, an empire level force raining, hellfire down on a colony, basically an open air prison, which many people have called it. I haven't been there, so I can't, verify the veracity of that, but people that I trust who have been there and have friends there have said that. So I just thought that was interesting that I don't know if he did that intentionally. I think he might have caught himself flat-footed there, but he compared the Palestinian state to the American Revolution against the British.
So that's what's happening here. That's conventional warfare. It's conventional warfare.
It's not conventional
No,
warfare.
it is absolutely. It is targeted at a hostile regime.
Right. So
that
I
attacked
totally
Israel.
get your point.
So that's interesting. And I, in a roundabout way, says a lot about the situation. And, you know, good on Robbie for being intellectually honest there, whether it was on purpose or not, and good on Bree for explaining the reality of the situation. And good on Andrew Tate, by the way, for really stumping old Piers Morgan there. So one of our last segments tonight is kind of on this same realm. And this guy, Martyr Maid, spoke with Glenn Greenwald recently. And I heard about this guy originally on Tim Pool's show. I had no idea who he was at the time. You probably, if you've seen any of my previous streams, I did one where I showed some clips from Tim Pool's argument with Max Blumenthal where they mentioned him. And at that time I said, I have no idea what he's talking about. The guy's like, well, Martyr Maid said this and da, da, da. But this guy is insanely on point. And it was really cool of Glenn Greenwald to interview him. It's like a half-hour interview. I of all the stuff I've showed tonight, this is the one thing I highly recommend you go watch in its entirety, because this guy is sharp dude. He's very balanced in his takes, and he's done a lot of research and has a lot of knowledge on the subject, as you'll see in these clips that I pulled here. So we're going to start with this one where he talks about how Americans really don't have empathy for people in a war zone because we haven't been forced to live in one ever.
Well, I've always been a book nerd and a history nerd, and I happened to come across that topic maybe about a decade ago, where I started really digging into it past the television news and sort of magazine article level. And I guess it was the shock that I had when I started looking into the topic and realizing that the picture I had of it, which was the typical picture most sort of Americans who know the topic at a surface level have, how far removed from reality that picture that I had was. And as I learned more and more about it, and got to know people on both sides of that conflict, you know, I found that it's one of those topics that the more somebody learns about it, regardless of which side they're on, if they're on a side and they learn more about the topic, they will become more understanding and empathetic of the other side. It's just one of those topics where that's always true. And I think it's really easy to forget that you were touching on this quite a bit when you were talking about Ukraine. It's easy to forget in America what it's like to go through a tremendous amount of suffering and what that can do to a people. You know, if you think back to Germany after World War I, if you think about the Russians now, you know, people wonder how they can support Putin so strongly. Just go to Russia in the 1990s and find out what that place was like, and Putin was the guy in charge when that turned around. That's going to generate a lot of loyalty. Well, if you go back to like the U.S. Civil War, that was the last time we really had a war that affected Americans on a large scale. I mean, one out of every 18 or 20 men in America was a casualty in that war.
You might be able to argue Vietnam, maybe not on the same scale, but definitely had an effect on American people too.
Or down south, 1 out of every 5 military-age males was a casualty in that war. And everybody, after that war was over, really had this idea that that was terrible. That was a bad idea. Even if it ended slavery, like that was just a traumatic experience for our country. And there was a real push and a real feeling on both sides of the North-South divide that we needed to try to heal those wounds and move past that, because everybody had experienced the pain that came with that war. That was a century and a half ago at this point. And it was really the last time we had that kind of experience. And so now, when we look at a lot of these wars, I think we forgot what it's like to not just have your sons go off and die. That's awful. But to have your kids die in a war, to like your small children die in a war, your wife die in a war, we just don't remember what that's like as Americans. And so we end up cheering it on as if it's a spectator sport.
Everything in this country related to politics nowadays is like a spectator sport. Look at the way that we rope ourselves off into the red and blue team as one example. So let's keep watching. This guy makes a lot of great points.
Indians is somehow much more foreign. Obviously, 9/11 didn't help with that, with our perception of the Muslim world. But when you get to know the people there, when you spend time in the West Bank, the emails I get from people who listened to the podcast series and actually came away with more sympathy for what the Jews were going through in Europe when they were driven to adopt Zionism as an ideology in the first place. These are just regular people. These are just regular people, and they have the same feelings, same emotions the rest of us have, right? And I think that we as Americans, when there's a conflict like the one that's going on between the Israelis and the Palestinians, we have the benefit of being able to step back, of being able to respond not emotionally to everything that's happening.
Not emotionally.
We really ought to take seriously our role as a peacemaker in situations like that. And actually, for quite a while, we did do that. I mean, say what you want about somebody like Bill Clinton, but he put a lot of work in to try to at least move the ball forward in the peace process.
I did not know that. Cheers to Bill Clinton.
And we saw that as our role in the conflict. And that has really all changed since maybe the mid 2000s or so, when now, I mean, from the highest levels of power all the way down to the people on the street and on Twitter, when this conflict kicked off, this most recent round of violence kicked off, it's as if people see it as their job to egg the other side on. And if the Israelis look, it's totally understandable after what happened on October 7th that the Israelis were going to be in a nasty mood, right? Like, you go back after 9/11, it would have been great if we could have stepped back, but that's asking a lot. Something like that happens, the country involved is going to want to do something about it just to get it back, and that's fine.
See also 9/11.
I understand that, but we as Israel's friend, as a country, and one that is disconnected from this, we ought to play the role of trying to talk them off that ledge.
So he makes a great point there that historically we were the peacemakers, but that dynamic has changed. I wonder why. It's not like it has anything to do with, I don't know, money.
Don't tase me, bro. Don't tase me. I didn't do anything. Ow! 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 Ow!
Okay, sorry. I'm sorry. I can't help it.
True. And so I think what a lot of people believe, Daryl, about this conflict is that, look, at the end of the day, no matter what else you want to say, you have Israel that's a democratic country and wants to live in peace with its neighbors. And then on the other hand, you have Muslims who just hate Jews and hate Israel and want to take Israel off the map. Their only goal is to kill all Jews. And therefore, there's no way to side with anyone but Israel, because Israel's the only one there trying to be humanistic and kind of noble and civilized. The rest are just these primitive, hateful people who hate Jews and want to kill them all.
No, I hear you. It's definitely a tiger by the tail.
What is your, what would you say to people who believe that?
You remember when we were kids and you would have your younger brother or maybe your younger cousin or something, and you were picking on him, bullying him a little bit, and you're holding him down, and maybe you're just torturing him a little bit just to show him you're stronger or whatever it is. And he gets really, really, really angry. He's like, let me up, you better let me up right now. And he starts fighting, struggling, maybe tries to bite your wrist or something to get you to let him go. And now at this point, you got to hold on because the little guy is really angry. And you tell him, I'm going to let you up if you stop struggling. And he's like, screw you, I'm not stopping. it's a similar situation to that in a lot of ways. You know, there's no question that, and I think everybody, even very pro-Israel people, in my experience, when they really learn the history of the pre-1948 period, they come away with a lot of sympathy for what happened to the Palestinians. I mean, you're talking about 750,000 people who got driven out of their homes at gunpoint and not allowed to return, right? And those people's grandchildren are still in the places that they fled to. And that's a raw deal. You can have sympathy for what the Zionists were trying to do because of, you know, the pogroms they were reacting to in Europe and everything. But there's no question that, like, the Zionists may have been jumping out of a burning building by going from Europe to Palestine, but they landed on somebody on the way down on the sidewalk. And that guy got really angry because he didn't understand that there was a burning building that you were jumping out of. He just knows somebody landed on him and it hurts.
Or he didn't understand why it was that he had to give up his land because the Europeans had a Holocaust against the Jews. Like, the question was, why don't you in Europe give part of your land since you're the ones who did this? Like, how do we have to give up our land to pay for your crimes?
Valid point. And I think his burning building analogy is much better than the beating up your little brother analogy. Yeah, like, the Jewish people were in a precarious position. A lot of them had been killed. And let's keep in mind, the Holocaust did not just include Jewish people. It was mostly Jewish people, obviously. But the Nazis went after other minorities and handicapped people and basically anyone they didn't deem as fit for their master race, so to speak. So there is that side of it too. But the point he makes there is good, is that when people have perspective about what actually happened on both sides, they can empathize a lot better. And that's something that's obviously lost in today's culture. Let's keep going.
I mean, especially, you know, most people, I think, when I talk to people about this, I realize a lot of the time that the average person thinks this is an ancient conflict. Like, it goes back thousands of years.
Right.
It's this ancient, you know, it's ever since Ishmael and you know, and Isaac were born. They've just been at war. That's just not true. I've got a photograph.
I didn't know this.
From 1913, so the year before the First World War, and the year before business in Palestine really started to accelerate. And it's a picture from a cafe in Jerusalem, or I think it might be in Jaffa, actually, yeah. And it's a picture of a band playing in this cafe, and it's two Muslims, a Jew, and a Christian playing in a band together
in 1913.
It's not that long before the founding of Israel and everything spun out of control. Things were not, this was not a blood feud much more than 100 years ago. You know, this is a modern political dispute that is very much the result of a modern ideology. It's not even really so much of a religion.
And also a lot of U.S. funding.
Just impulse, as much as Zionism does draw on, you know, sort of ancient mythology to tie people to it and motivate people. This is a nationalist phenomenon. This is something that emerged out of modernity, out of Europe specifically, where nationalism was on the rise, and you had this group of people who needed a country. I mean, let's just, you know, the lesson of the Jews in the last 1,000 years and the lesson of the Palestinians in the last 70 years or so is that everybody needs their own country. You know, it's not good to be a minority in somebody else's country. It's better in some than it is in others, but it's nice to have somewhere to go. And the Jews needed that. And yeah, unfortunately, they did end up landing on somebody who had nothing to do with the situation. And, you know, the United States, we actually recognized and had some level of neutrality in the situation up till about the late 60s, early 70s. You know, Lyndon Johnson was like the first very strongly Zionist American president. And
interesting.
The presidents previous had misgivings. I mean, Eisenhower made the Israelis and the French and the British skedaddle from Egypt after the Suez Crisis in '56. And they weren't happy about that, but he didn't care. He had a Cold War to fight. Ever since then, we have been, lock, stock, and barrel only for Israel. We don't care what the Palestinians' grievances are, just like we didn't care what the Russians' grievances were in the lead up to the Ukrainian war. There was a big kerfuffle over on Twitter the other day because.
So this next piece, he makes a lot of great points there. First of all, about the nature of the conflict and this idea that it's some ages-old conflict, like some biblical level conflict. That's the kind of shit that's spread by not only Zionists, but also Christian fundamentalists who see the Holy Land as like the place where Christ is going to return and all that. So that's an interesting point that he made there. But in this next clip, what he talks about is how it's worthwhile for us to examine the motives of people who hate us. And that is something that is so lost on a lot of people. But check this out.
Laden's letter to America about his reasons for 9/11.
So that, I don't know, recently this was trending on TikTok and of course they censored it.
And just hearing for the first time kind of what his actual grievances were. And, that doesn't justify what people do or anything, but we ought to, like, if there's a long running conflict, especially, we should be having conversations about, like, okay, what is it these people are so upset about that they're willing to die in large numbers? They're willing to take on a state like Israel or state like America. They're willing to incur our wrath because of
Stupid
something
ass
that's
boy. Hey, look.
really apparently bothering them. What is it? We don't do that at all. We just, we put everything in the same framing that we use for World War II, where they're evil.
There it is.
They're irrational. You cannot possibly negotiate with these people. They don't have any legitimate grievances. They don't have anything driving them toward this conflict other than hatred for us and our way of life. And I think that most people don't actually.
I didn't think about it, but they use that exact same framing for post 9/11. Like, the terrorists hate us and our freedom, and that's just it. Like, it's not because we're in their countries killing their families. It's they just hate freedom.
Believe that. But for some reason, maybe it has to do with the media environment or just the structure of our democratic political system. The people who do take that line wield a disproportionate amount of influence in the discourse, right? And this is something that you see drive the Israeli-Palestinian conflict, especially. People, like you said, think that the Israelis want peace, the Palestinians don't want peace. That's totally just ahistorical nonsense, okay? There are good people on both sides who have worked extremely hard for peace.
Sound familiar?
Palestinian negotiators like Saeb Erekat, a lot of people who were very dedicated to trying to figure out a negotiated solution. They worked for years on it. And so did a lot of Israelis. And there are also elements on both sides, like Hamas, like the Likud party, especially as it is under Netanyahu, who truly do not want peace.
So yeah, we have to look at that through the lens of our own empire and the things that we've done over the last several years. And I think that's why a lot of the more intelligent people in media are going like, hey, remember what happened post 9/11 and how big of a mistake we all thought that we all agreed that was? Let's not do that again. Let's not let other people do that again. I mean, we've obviously continued to do it anyway, despite the will of the people. For reasons I won't go into right now, because I don't want to be called an anti-Semite.
No one in high school knew what the word anti-Semitic was until Ye made it popular.
So this last clip, well, just watch it and let's talk about it.
I mean, everybody
pro
gets
Hamas, pro terrorism, pro Hamas.
Who want to promote war.
Right.
Yeah. But the question is not what you think of Israel in a broad sense. It's not what you think of the history in a broad sense. Any of that stuff, whether Israel has a right to exist. The question is Israel is Israel
such a good point,
meeting the standards of the first world democratic countries and in the world for trying to avoid civilian casualties?
Yeah, because we're constantly told It's the most moral army. The IDF is the most moral army and all that stuff. So this guy makes a solid point here.
And that's all. When I look at what they're, especially in the first several weeks of this conflict, you watch what they're doing. I don't think it's possible to make the case that they were living up to those standards. Something like when they hit the Jabalia refugee camp, and the Israeli spokesman, the IDF spokesman, was talking to Wolf Blitzer, and Wolf asked him, knowing there were civilians there, you still hit this thing? And the guy said, well, there might have been tunnels there. And my ears pricked up. I was like, might have been tunnels. And then he said, well, the terrorists that you were trying to hit there, did you kill them? And he said, we're looking into that. And it's like, you hit a refugee camp with 6 JDAMs based on the idea that there might have been tunnels there and that you might have had a guy that you were able to kill who was bad. I would want the American commander who ordered something like that in Iraq or wherever, anywhere in the world, I would want that guy put on trial. Like for some reason, we make exceptions for Israel that truly we would not make for our own forces. There is much more outrage over things that came out during the Iraq War than things that are really pretty overwhelmingly worse when you look at what's going on in Gaza and what's been going on for a long time. I mean, you're talking about you really have to remember, you're talking about a stateless population where half the population's women, half the population's under 18 years old. You're talking about maybe 20% of the population are men over aged 18. Maybe about, they think 12 to 15% of the population are men between 18 and 40. So like military age men, broadly speaking. These are people who have homemade rockets and AK-47s. And obviously they proved on October 7th that can do a lot of damage. That's extremely dangerous and is something that Israel has to take very seriously. But is that something that merits a regular military, full-blown military assault kind of response? The idea that Hamas uses human shields, I'm sure there's something to that. But that's, to me, not really the point. It's not their responsibility to look after these people. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Pretty much every country on
Hamas
earth
the same privileges
is Israel behaving.
We afford Israel
something to that.
I keep missing the pause button and starting the video.
To me, not really the point. It's not their responsibility to look after these people. Hamas is a terrorist organization. Pretty much every country on earth, their attitude toward Hamas is if you find one of them, kill them. That's how Hamas gets treated by the global community. There's no pretension that they are a first world democratic country that ought to be treated with respect at international, events and organizations, anything like that. Israel is that. Israel wants to be considered a respectable first world country, and we should hold them to first world standards. That's really.
I mean, that is probably one of the best points that I've heard made on this issue, and like I said, I highly encourage you to go listen to this whole piece that Glenn Greenwald did with Martyr Made, and I still I want to listen to his podcast. It's very daunting and long, but this guy went into the weeds and did research on the whole subject, and so he's very knowledgeable about it, and he talked to a lot of people in Palestine and in Israel. And like he said, there's people come away from it with sympathy for Israel as much as they do for the Palestinians, because Israel was in a very precarious position. And I love the analogy he made of someone jumping out of a burning building and landing on someone else. Like that's kind of what happened in a more, analogous sense, or it's a better analogy, I think, than the one he made earlier about beating up your little brother. But go listen to that. And I just want to show, in relation to this, I published this video as a short, but there used to be this show called Sledgehammer, and this is to end this on a kind of comedic note. There used to be this show in the 80s called Sledgehammer, and there's this scene where he's a cop, and his whole thing is he's just like a badass cop that sleeps with his gun and everything. It's like cartoonish, right? And so there's this scene where they call him and they're like, Sledgehammer, there's a sniper on the roof. And he shows up to the scene and the sniper's like shooting at people. And he just takes a bazooka out of his trunk and destroys the whole building. And I kind of made the analogy to what's going on right now with that. And it did all right as a short, but I'm going to show it again here real quick. Just because I think it's a good way to top off this clip here. So now I got to dig for it. Forgive me for the lack of preparation here. Where is that? I think I added it originally, and then I deleted it like a dummy. What did I? So I probably just dragged it to the wrong folder or something. I don't know. I'm terrible. But that's what I get for being live, I guess. It's got to be in this folder. Well, maybe I'll have to show that another time. Maybe it's on the desktop. Fuck it. I'm gonna search it. There it is. All right, watch this real quick.
Sledgehammer! All right, what's going on? I gotta get to work. I've got a sniper on that roof. Hammer, what are you doing? You'll get killed! I think I got him.
I love how it ends with him. I think I got him. Absolutely hilarious. So this is going to be the last segment of the night, and I know I'm going to anger, or the day. I keep forgetting. I'm doing these. Forgive me for just popping up at random times, but I'm still trying to feel out when the best time to do these live streams is. And at the end of the day, most people don't watch it live anyway, so it's not that big of a deal right now. But I want to experiment with some different dates and times because I've been super busy and I love doing this. It's a labor of love for me. It's how I get all this venom out of my system. But this is an issue to close out on that I think is going to probably anger some people. But I saw this bit on Rogan and they were talking about squirting. And I'm a person who has some experience with this, firsthand experience. So basically, Stavros is talking about sleeping with a squirter, and Joe Rogan kind of calls him out. So just watch this clip, and we'll start there.
Sure, it's real.
I mean,
you sure she wasn't peeing all over you?
It was clear. I've thought about this a lot.
How often do you pee and it's not clear?
And it's not clear?
Yeah.
Quite a bit. I'm not very hydrated.
Okay, that's not good. And you got to think. You also got to
amber. It's not like, you know.
You got to rationalize. If someone has so much piss in them that they piss while you're fucking them,
right?
They're probably hydrated.
That's true. She
So
didn't
it's gonna
seem
be clear.
hydrated. She was a
Both times it's happened to me, they were insanely drunk. We'll get to that.
hefty gal. She was, you know.
Probably very hydrated.
You think so?
I don't know.
I don't know. She didn't seem
I don't know what
hydrated.
it is.
She drank a lot.
They do say it's real, but then they also say it's just pee.
I feel like it's real. I've thought about this a lot.
It's sort of like Jesus. If you believe in it,
right.
it can work for you.
You make your own thing. Faith is beautiful, Joe. And I believe it's real. I believe it's another thing. It doesn't taste like piss.
How do you know what piss tastes like?
You could guess.
Clear piss?
I guess I haven't
Like
tasted
really?
I guess it doesn't
like
smell
from an
like
elite
piss.
ultra runner.
Yeah. I guess
Just running with a water bladder on.
Yeah.
Sucking in all that water.
All right. Not bad.
So I wanted to comment on this personally because this is my contention, right? Because they've done studies, and I'm going to show the data as well. But in my experience, it's usually, you could say it's piss, basically. And you could say that, you know, when girls get to like a climax point, maybe they lose control of their bladder a little bit. You could say that. I mean, that's definitely possible. And that's, I think, what a lot of people chalk it up to. But there's this argument, people will go like, no, there's seminal fluid in it. Yeah, there is seminal fluid in it because women do get wet. They emit, that's what they call wet pussy. You know, that's Wet Ass Pussy by Cardi B and Nicki, what was it, Nicki Minaj? No. Or Megan Thee Stallion, sorry. Both super hot. But anyway, I'm getting sidetracked. Squirt is a mix, has seminal fluid in it because it comes out of a vagina that's already wet. So of course there's going to be seminal fluid in Squirt, you know, because it comes out during sex, but it's pee. And I'll show you. Watch this next clip because Joe Rogan is so funny. He calls Homeboy out a little bit.
On the matter. I think there's a lot of people that have a vested interest in believing they were pissed on.
Big piss, big squirt.
Big piss money is throwing off the data. Conclusions. The present data based on ultrasonographic bladder monitoring and biochemical analysis indicates that squirting is essentially the involuntary emission of urine during sexual activity.
See,
although a marginal contribution of prostatic secretions to the.
So when I've run into dudes, like he's opposing it because dudes think it's like, oh no, I made her come, like I'm the man, and so they get offended by this. But what it really comes down to is these men don't understand that women are not like men. Men ejaculate. Women don't ejaculate naturally. It's not a thing. It's a thing that was dreamed up by porn. Like the influence of porn over the years, because porn is designed to appeal to men. I think that squirting has become a construct of that world, of the pornography world, because men want to believe they made a girl come. So she pees all over them and voila, they think they're the fucking king of delivering the orgasm. And anyway, watch the rest of this clip and then we'll dive into the data a little deeper.
The emitted fluid and often it exists. So that's like pussy juice.
Well, that's like a little.
How come they can't just say pussy juice?
This says Dr.
Will YouTube ban me for pussy juice?
Stress incontinence.
Isn't it kind of interesting though that we have like?
Well,
I would. You couldn't say pussy juice.
Yeah.
Like if you're publishing a scientific paper,
sure.
we must have another word for this term that's acceptable for everyone to discuss the exact same goddamn thing.
Yeah.
Whatever.
So just to go into the data a little bit deeper for you, there was a study done by scientists several years ago, and Vice reported on it. And this is basically what Vice had to say about it, right? So first they say, squirting is just peeing, say scientists. A new study says that women who produce a lot of liquid during sex are urinating out of pleasure, though a broader debate over female ejaculation rages on. And the only reason a broader debate rages on is because there are dudes in their feelings that are like, no, it's real. It's totally real. It's totally real. No, and again, like I said, maybe you get a girl so hot, she loses control of her bladder. That's possible. That's the one possible explanation. But the science is in, folks, unfortunately, for the dudes defending this still. On December 24th, a group of French scientists published what is probably the first medical journal article on squirting. They gave pelvic ultrasound scans to 7 women who previously reported emitting about a cup full of liquid when they had sex. By administering the scans after the women peed and then twice during sexual stimulation, they were able to conclude exactly where the liquid was coming from and what it consisted of. And spoiler alert, it was pee. So they basically did ultrasounds on these women's bladders before sex. And then after they were made to squirt, they did another ultrasound on their bladders, and their bladders were empty because they peed on the guy. So it's like it's undeniable science, folks. Moving on to the next slide here, because this kind of just stores it up for you. it should be noted that there are papers that say, yeah, there is something that comes out of vaginas during sex that definitely isn't urine, as I just spoke about. That is, girls do get wet. Cardi B and Megan Thee Stallion have a song about it, but they don't squirt it out of their pussies like guys do out of their dicks. It's a totally different thing. And men cannot wrap their heads around the fact that women's bodies are different than men's, and they don't ejaculate unless you believe, this pornographic construct. Anyway, it's supposedly liquid from the female prostate. That's what Megan and Cardi's song is about. But in this specific study, the first to focus on women who soak the sheets, the answer is nah. The present data based on ultrasonographic bladder monitoring and biochemical analysis indicate that squirting is essentially the involuntary emission of urine during sexual activity, although a marginal contribution of prostatic secretions to the emitted fluid often exists, is how the researchers put it. So like I just said, people will say, oh no, there's secretions in it. Yeah, because it came out of her vagina that was wet. So I just wanted to put an end to any debate on the squirting subject as I saw that clip, and I was just like, it never ends. Like, these guys, these dudes in their feelings that watch a lot of porn and think this is a real thing are, let's face it, morons. You're too proud to admit what's going on here, and I feel bad for you. But hey, the science is in. It's pretty undisputable. They literally monitored these women's bladders and examined they even did analysis of the fluid, and it was mostly urine, with traces of vaginal secretion. So there you have it. Squirting debunked on the Polyticks show. And with that, thank you for tuning in if you did. I've been trying to spend a little more time putting these shows together, so when I actually do them, the content is good and it's not just, me going live for the sake of going live. So it's been a little bit less frequent lately because I've had a little less time, but I appreciate you paying attention. Please like and subscribe and do all that shit. I've noticed this. I got a video banned from TikTok a couple days ago that was basically a bunch of clips that I got from TikTok. And I know that YouTube throttles a lot of stuff. I'm not going to claim that they give a shit about me because I'm not near as big as someone like Jimmy Dore or Russell Brand or whatever. But I do think every little bit helps. So if you like the content, you genuinely like the content, and you're watching, like, subscribe, do all that good shit. And I really appreciate you for hanging out. And I will see you next time, or on Twitter. Come find me on Twitter. Let's talk more. Or please, if there's stuff you can dispute, that's the thing I love the most about this form of media, is that it's much more interactive. Where, if I said something that you disagree with, I want to just post a link proving me wrong. I'm not rigid in this. I will change my opinion based on new data, and I consider myself open-minded and try to be that as much as possible. If the last 5 years have proved anything, it's how wrong I was about, I used to think conservatives were crazy for, their takes on Trump or COVID or a lot of stuff that now I'm like, holy shit, I was wrong, and I've apologized to a lot of those people. So my journey is about, trying to be open-minded to the fact that, I'm not always right. And, but also trying to highlight things I see in the media that are ridiculous and hypocritical. Because if I can say anything about myself, is that I'm not a hypocrite. And that's one of the things I hate more than anything, with all this censorship shit that's happening now on the right, people who I eventually sided with over a lot of this stuff, now violating their own principles because they're emotional about it, just turning into little AOCs, So anyway, I appreciate you. I love you. Thank you for hanging out, and just remember that. Remember the advice of Alex Jones.
I hear you. It's definitely a tiger by the tail.
I love that clip. Take care of yourself, and we'll see you soon.